I still remember the moment they told me about the trip. It was a lazy Saturday afternoon, sunlight spilling through the kitchen window, and the smell of pancakes lingering in the air. My siblings were crowded around the table, buzzing with excitement. As Mom held up this glossy Disney brochure, the colors so bright they almost hurt my eyes. "We're going to Disney," she announced, her voice carrying that unmistakable blend of joy and chaos that always comes with family plans. My heart did a little flip. I could practically feel the thrill of the rides, the smell of popcorn and churros, and the music playing in my head even before we stepped foot in the park, that I tried to match the enthusiasm around me, laughing at their jokes, pointing at the rides I wanted to go on, imagining myself next to them on Space Mountain, screaming and laughing together. There was a small, quiet part of me, barely noticeable at first, that just wanted to make sure I really belonged. In this moment, sometimes, in my family, excitement came in waves that didn't always include everyone equally. But right then, I shoved that thought aside and focused on the brochure, tracing the lines of the map with my finger, imagining the stories we'd have to tell later. I could almost hear the fireworks in the background, even though we were still in the kitchen, and I pictured the castle towering in the distance, lights sparkling against the night sky. My siblings were arguing over who would sit next to who on the plane, their laughter filling the room, and I laughed too, louder than I expected, letting myself feel the happiness. Packing lists started flying around: sunscreen, Mickey ears, comfortable shoes, and I joined in, scribbling my own little notes, feeling that rush of anticipation, the feeling that anything was possible when the whole family was going somewhere together. Even as I immersed myself in that excitement, there was a tiny, fleeting thought that whispered in the back of my mind: I hope there's room for me, too. It was so quiet that I almost missed it, drowned out by the chatter and laughter, but it was there, a tiny seed of unease hiding under all the joy. I pushed it down, telling myself I was imagining things, letting myself believe that this was going to be one of those perfect family moments I'd remember forever. And in that sunlight-filled kitchen, with pancakes and Disney brochures and my family buzzing around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, unfiltered excitement. At first, it was nothing obvious, just little moments that almost didn't register. The kind of things you'd normally brush off if you weren't paying attention. Like one evening, I walked into the living room and found my siblings huddled together on the couch, giggling over something on Mom's laptop. I leaned over to see, and it was the Disney website, hotel rooms, tickets, those bright pictures of smiling families. I laughed, trying to join in, but the laughter kind of fizzled the second I spoke. The screen tilted away just slightly, as if I wasn't supposed to see. It wasn't hostile, not really, but it was sharp. A subtle kind of exclusion you can't call out without sounding paranoid. So, I told myself I was overthinking. I forced a smile and walked away, pretending my chest didn't feel like it had tightened a little. Another time, Dad was on the phone with what sounded like the travel agent, pacing back and forth in the hallway. I caught words like 5 tickets and no, that's all we'll need. My brain snagged on that word, 5. I almost interrupted him, asked who the 5 were supposed to be, but my feet felt glued to the floor. My stomach twisted, but my mind immediately started throwing excuses at me. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe he meant something else. Families make slip-ups all the time, right? Right? Still, once you notice cracks, you can't unsee them. Little things kept piling up. At dinner, conversations about our trip happened faster than I could keep up with, references flying over my head like I wasn't even sitting at the same table. Packing lists came up again, and I noticed no one asked me what I wanted to bring or which rides I wanted to go on this time. They just carried on, like a current sweeping forward, and I was a stone left behind on the riverbank. One night, I sat in my room, scrolling through photos of Disney on my phone. The castle lit up against the night sky, kids wearing Mickey ears, families smiling with their arms around each other. I told myself not to worry, that they were just disorganized, that maybe they hadn't finalized everything yet. But that small whisper in the back of my mind, the one I had ignored before, was starting to grow louder. And this time, I couldn't shake it off as easily. The moment of truth didn't come with shouting or drama. It came quietly, like most heartbreaks do. We were sitting in the living room, the TV humming faintly in the background, when Mom casually dropped the words that would stick to my ribs like ice. There just isn't room for you on this trip. That was it. No big explanation. No softening of the blow. Just a flat statement, like she was reading the weather forecast. My first reaction was to laugh. Because how do you even process a sentence like that? I looked around, waiting for someone to crack a smile, to tell me it was a joke. But no one did. My siblings kept staring at their phones. Dad avoided my eyes. And suddenly the air in the room felt so heavy I could barely breathe that I tried to ask what she meant. What do you mean there's no room? It's Disney. It's not like we're carpooling to the grocery store. My voice cracked halfway through, which only made it worse. Mom sighed. The kind of sigh that says she's already tired of the conversation. The hotel only had space for 5. The tickets were booked. It just worked out this way. Worked out this way. Like I was some puzzle piece that didn't fit. So they just shrugged and left me out of the box that I felt my throat tighten as. I looked at my siblings, waiting for one of them. Just one, to say something. To say they wanted me there. But all I saw was silence, their eyes glued to screens, their bodies leaning away, as if siding with me would make the room collapse. Inside, I was screaming. How do you forget your own family member? How do you plan a trip for weeks and not notice the empty chair at the table? My chest burned, my palms were sweating, but on the outside, I froze. Because that's what I've always done. I shut down. The Disney brochure was still on the coffee table. I stared at it so hard that the castle on the cover blurred into nothing. Just a smear of colors, mocking me. My excitement from weeks ago replayed in my mind like some cruel prank. Me tracing the map with my finger, me laughing louder than I meant to, me thinking I belonged. And now, all I could think was how stupid I had been. The worst part wasn't the words. It was the finality. The way they said it like a decision already made, like there was nothing to fight for. As if I wasn't even worth the effort of rearranging, rebooking, or even apologizing properly. Just no room. That was the crushing blow. And I sat there, pretending not to care, while inside something quietly cracked. The hours after they told me were the hardest. I kept replaying the words. In my head like a broken record. There isn't room for you. It echoed in places it had no business echoing. When I was brushing my teeth, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, even when I tried to distract myself with music. No matter what I did, the phrase came back, cold and sharp, cutting deeper. Every time. At first, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it really was just a logistical mistake. Maybe I wasn't intentionally left out. It just worked out that way. But the more I thought about it, the more that explanation crumbled. Because deep down, I knew, when people want you somewhere, they find a way. They don't shrug and tell you there's no room. They make room, and that's when the self-doubt started to creep in. I found myself asking the ugliest questions. Was I too much of a burden? Do I not bring enough to the family to be worth a hotel room? Was I the extra piece, the one they only keep around when it's convenient? It felt childish to even think those things. But when you've just been excluded by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, your brain doesn't stay rational. It eats at you. I paced my room, trying to shake it off. I caught my reflection in the mirror, and I hated the look on my face. Sad, small, powerless. I kept whispering, "Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry." But the tears betrayed me anyway, slipping down my cheeks before I could stop them. And then came the anger, just as quickly. Anger at them, yes, but also anger at myself. For caring this much. For letting their rejection sink into my bones. I wanted to scream at the walls. Why am I not enough? What did I do wrong? But the walls had no answers. They never do. I tried to distract myself by imagining what the trip would be like without me. I pictured them laughing on rides, eating cotton candy, posing in front of the castle. My chest tightened at the thought of being invisible in all those photos, of coming home to hear their stories, their inside jokes, their souvenirs, none of which would have my fingerprints on them. And worst of all, I already knew they probably wouldn't even notice my absence as much as I did. It's a horrible thing to realize that you feel like a ghost in your own family. Alive, present, but somehow overlooked. That night, I crawled into bed and pulled the blanket over my head like I was 10 years old again, trying to hide from monsters. Only this time, the monster wasn't under my bed. It was in my chest, whispering doubts that I couldn't silence. The thing about pain is, it's rarely new. When something like this happens, it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It digs its claws into every old scar you thought had healed. Sitting there, staring at the ceiling that night, I started remembering. And once those memories came flooding back, I couldn't stop them. That I remembered birthdays as a kid when my siblings got big parties, balloons, cakes, cousins filling the living room, while mine somehow slipped by with a store-bought cake and a rushed, happy birthday before everyone scattered. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. But I remember blowing out those candles, feeling the silence, and wondering if maybe I just wasn't this celebration type. Then there were the family photos. I can still picture one in particular, the trip to the beach. Everyone was lined up, sunburned and smiling, arms around each other. And me? I was the one asked to take the picture. You'll get the next one, they promised. The next one never came. I don't exist in that memory, except as the invisible hand behind the camera. And then, high school, the class trip to the mountains. I had saved up, begged to go, but at the last minute, my parents said, "It's too expensive, maybe next year." Meanwhile, my siblings went to their sports tournaments and sleepovers without question. I told myself it was about money, about logistics, about timing. But sitting there now, years later, I realized how often the excuse had been the same. There's no room, there's no money. It just worked out that way. Always a reason, always a way to explain why I was the one left behind. These memories aren't loud. They don't scream. They sit quietly in the corners of your mind until something, like being told there's no room for you on a Disney trip, wakes them up. And then suddenly you're reliving them all at once, like someone flipped through the photo album of your life and pointed at every page where you were missing. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear. This wasn't just about Disney. It was about a pattern, a thread woven through my life with them. A thread of being almost included, almost wanted, but never quite enough. And maybe the worst part was how normal it had started to feel. Like being excluded wasn't the exception, it was the rule. That I rolled over in bed, clutching my pillow, the glow from my phone screen lighting up the room. My siblings' laughter floated down the hallway, muffled but unmistakable. They were probably talking about the trip, about how fun it would be, about who would ride what first. And I lay there, invisible again, drowning in memories that whispered the same cruel truth. This wasn't the first time I'd been left behind. And deep down, I feared it wouldn't be the last. At some point, you get tired of crying. That's what happened to me. I woke up the next morning, eyes swollen, throat raw, and I just felt empty. I couldn't keep replaying the same old wounds in my head forever. Something inside me, small at first, like a flicker of a match, whispered, enough that I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the half-light creeping through the blinds. The house was quiet, which made it easier to hear my own thoughts. And those thoughts weren't the same as the night before. Instead of why me, they started to shift into what if I didn't wait for them? What if I just went anyway? The idea seemed ridiculous at first. A solo Disney trip? Who does that? Disney is about families, about smiling kids with sticky fingers, about parents wrangling strollers. But then I thought about something else. Maybe that's exactly why I should go. To prove to myself that joy wasn't something I had to be invited into, that I could create it on my own. That I grabbed my phone and opened the Disney website. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart racing as I scrolled through ticket options. I could feel this strange, nervous energy pulsing through me. It was the same sensation I'd get before making a big decision, like standing at the edge of a diving board, toes curled, water shimmering below. Part of me hesitated. What if they found out? Would they laugh at me, call me desperate, make me feel foolish for trying? That fear gnawed at me, but then another thought cut through it like a blade. They already left you behind. What's left to lose? That was the moment the flicker turned into a flame. I imagined myself walking through those park gates alone, the castle rising in front of me, the music swelling. Not as a forgotten piece of someone else's trip, but as the main character in my own. The thought sent a thrill through me I hadn't felt in years. That I started making notes, costs, travel dates, hotels. My hands shook as I wrote, not from fear this time, but from adrenaline. Every scribble felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that had been chipped away by years of being the afterthought. The truth hit me in that moment. Maybe I couldn't control how my family treated me, but I could control what I did next. And what I was going to do was make room for myself. Once the decision was made, it was like a switch flipped inside me. All the heaviness I'd been carrying, the resentment, the sadness, the quiet tears, suddenly felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter. Because now I had a plan. I sat at my desk with my laptop open, the soft glow of the screen washing over me. My heart was pounding as I searched for tickets, my fingers trembling a little each time I clicked next. The prices weren't small, and for a moment, that old familiar voice of doubt crept back in. What if this is stupid? What if you regret spending this much just to prove a point? But then another voice cut in, sharper, steadier. This isn't about proving a point to them. This is about proving something to yourself. So I bought the ticket. Just like that, confirmation email sitting in my inbox, my name printed clearly at the top. My name, not forgotten, not left out. Just me, bold and undeniable. I stared at it for a while, smiling so hard my cheeks ached. From there, it was a flurry of planning. I checked flights, compared hotels, scrolled through endless lists of top 10 must-see things at Disney. I scribbled notes in a messy notebook, ride priorities, snack spots, parade times. Each bullet point made the trip feel more real, more mine. I even started to picture the visuals in my head. Walking down Main Street with a chuo in hand, the sun warming my face, the castle rising in the distance. Standing in line for a ride, laughing, not with anyone else, but with myself. Because maybe, just maybe, I didn't need anyone to validate my happiness. There was a moment, though, when fear tried to creep back in. As I zipped up my small suitcase, I caught myself imagining what would happen if my family found out. Would they be angry? Embarrassed? Would they roll their eyes and say, "Of course you had to make it about you"? But then I reminded myself, these were the same people who had looked me in the eye and said there was no room. If they had no problem leaving me behind, why should I feel guilty for moving forward without them? So, I tucked away my doubts, slid my ticket and confirmation into the front pocket of my bag, and zipped it shut. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. I was taking action. I was choosing myself. And as I lay in bed that night, suitcase by the door, my heart buzzed with nervous energy. Tomorrow wasn't just another day. It was the start of something new, something mine. The moment I stepped through the gates, it hit me. The music, the colors, the air that somehow felt lighter, buzzing with energy. Main Street stretched out in front of me, lined with pastel buildings and the smell of popcorn drifting through the air. For a second, I just stood there, frozen, my ticket still in hand, staring at the castle in the distance. It was real. I was here, and I had made it happen on my own. I walked slowly at first, soaking it all in. The laughter of kids clutching Mickey balloons, the sound of a stroller's wheels rattling on the cobblestones, the faint chorus of a marching band playing down the street. I expected to feel out of place, the odd one out without a family trailing behind me. But the strangest thing happened. I didn't. I felt free. No one was tugging at my arm. No one was telling me what ride we had to do next. No one was rolling their eyes if I wanted to stop and just looked. I grabbed a churro from one of the stands, the sugar warm and gritty on my fingers, and laughed quietly to myself. It felt silly, maybe even a little lonely at moments, but it also felt right. Like I was finally giving myself permission to enjoy something without waiting for anyone else to hand it to me. The rides were a whole experience on their own. Space Mountain, God, the rush of the wind in my face, the darkness swallowing me whole, and then the explosion of neon lights. Around every curve, I screamed and laughed at the same time, and when the ride ended, I realized I was grinning like a fool, cheeks aching. Nobody saw me. Nobody had to. I wandered through Fantasyland, lingered by the carousel, and even stood in line to meet a character, something I would have been too embarrassed to do with my family watching. The photo of me standing next to Mickey Mouse, smiling, like a little kid again, is one of my favorites. It wasn't about the picture itself, it was about the fact that it was proof. Proof that I could find joy without needing to be included in theirs. And when the sun dipped low and the fireworks began, I found myself standing near the castle, shoulder to shoulder with strangers. Families hugged, couples kissed, kids pointed at the sky in awe. And me? I tilted my head back, eyes wide, the booms vibrating in my chest as colors exploded overhead. I felt small in the best way, part of something bigger, but not invisible, not forgotten. Just me, alive and present. In that exact moment, it wasn't the trip I thought I'd have. But maybe that was the point. I didn't need their version of Disney to have magic. I had found my own. The flight home felt different. Lighter somehow, but also heavier in ways I couldn't quite put into words. I leaned against the window, staring at the clouds drifting past, replaying the week in my head. The laughter on the rides, the taste of that chuo, the fireworks painting the sky. It all felt like something I had carved out of stone with my own hands. Something they hadn't given me, but something I'd taken for myself. And yet, in the quiet moments, I couldn't help but think of them. I imagined my family back home, probably sharing stories at the dinner table, their voices overlapping as they relived their trip. I wondered if they noticed the empty space where I should have been. Did they pause before saying we and think about me? Or did my absence barely register, just another detail skipped over in their storytelling? For a while, that thought stung. The idea that maybe my family had gone to Disney and lived their version of magic without me, without a second thought. But then another truth settled in, one that had been quietly forming ever since I stepped through those park gates alone. Maybe belonging isn't something you beg for. Maybe it's something you build piece by piece, even if it means building it outside the walls of the people you thought would give it to you. I realized something sitting there on that plane. I had always equated family with home, safety, a place where I'd always have a seat at the table. But this trip had forced me to see the cracks, the times I'd been overlooked, the birthdays half forgotten, the excuses about no room. And as much as it hurt, it also freed me. Because maybe family isn't about who shares your blood. Maybe it's about where you're seen, where you're wanted, where there's always room. I thought about the strangers I'd stood beside during the fireworks, shoulder to shoulder, their kids pointing and squealing. For a brief moment, I was part of their joy, not because they knew me, but because I was there, present, sharing the same sky. And in that moment, I didn't feel excluded. I didn't feel invisible. I just belonged. That realization hit harder than I expected. Family can fail you. They can forget you. But you can still belong to moments, to places, even to yourself. Especially to yourself. By the time the plane touched down, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't the same person who had sat in that living room, stunned and small, hearing the words, "no room." I was someone who had learned to make room for myself, even if it meant standing alone. Coming home, I half expected everything to go back to the way it was. The same routines, the same silences, the same patterns of being almost included. And honestly, not much had changed in my family's world. They were still caught up in their own trip, showing each other photos, laughing about inside. Jokes I wasn't part of. For the first time, though, I didn't feel gutted by it. I didn't feel like I was drowning on the outside looking in, because I had my own photos now, my own stories, my own laughter tucked into the corners of my memory. Standing in front of the castle at night, watching fireworks explode across the sky, I had claimed that moment fully mine. And it was enough. More than enough. One evening, I took out the souvenir I'd bought myself, a pair of classic Mickey ears with my name stitched on the back. I set them on my desk and just stared at them for a while. To anyone else, it might have looked like a silly piece of fabric and thread. But to me, it was proof. Proof that I had stopped waiting for someone else to make space for me. Proof that I had stepped into the kind of joy I'd been denied and found it anyway. Closure, I've realized, doesn't always come with apologies or acknowledgments. My family never apologized for leaving me out, and maybe they never will. But closure can also come from within, from deciding that their choices don't get to define my worth anymore. And empowerment? It came quietly, almost like a whisper. It was in the moment I bought that plane ticket. It was in every step I took down Main Street with no one beside me but my own shadow. It was in the laughter that spilled out of me on Space Mountain, wild and unashamed. Empowerment was realizing I don't need to be chosen to matter. I can choose myself. So, when I look back now, I don't just see the pain of being left behind. I see the strength it forced me to find. I see a version of myself who stopped asking, "Is there room for me?" and instead said, "I'll make my own." And if I could leave you with one thing, it's this. Don't wait for permission to step into your own joy. Don't wait for someone to tell you there's space for you at the table. If they won't make room, then go build your own table. You deserve that much. I know I did.